Welcome back to another episode of the Easy Button Investor Podcast with myself, Colbert Johnson, and Tucker Merrihew. Today we have a fun one for you guys. We have weekly community calls with a lot of our clients that you're using our products. And yesterday we had a lot of good questions that I wrote down. So I'm going to be throwing those questions out to Tucker, and him and I will dive into our just kind of blunt belief system on those topics, how we've navigated them, and the advice that we'd give. I'll start from the top here, Tucker.
Wait, full disclosure though, I have not heard or seen the questions, so
he hasn't. He has no idea what they are.
These are truly honest answers.
Yeah, which we'll see where it goes. The first question I got that I thought was interesting, Tucker, is one of the people in the group, and I'm not going to throw their names out there. One of the people in the group was asking about like how much education they should buy, because he'd been on the merry-go-round of he bought into Pineda's group, he's bought into Pace Morby's group, he's bought into Jamil's group, and every like little bit of cash he gets, he just buys another program. We've got guys like that are on kind of the course and coach Carousel, and they get to you in the past. What is your advice tend to be for someone like that who just, if it's almost like every investable dollar they have, they get right back on the coach and program Carousel? Well,
I guess first off, I don't necessarily blame a lot of people like that, because they do join coaching programs because they think that it's going to give them a magic bullet, or it's going to give them a magic strategy that will forever change their life. And, to be fair, there's not that many out there that will really do that. Most of the bigger coaching programs, they're internet marketers first, they're real estate investors second, despite whatever the hell they put out there about themselves, or whatever, avatar they create for you to see. But the reality is that there just isn't a whole lot of substance to most of it. It's really just you're buying into a brand and a community and whatever. But as far as like the optimum amount of education, it's really finding like the right person at what point in your journey, right? And I would like to say, oh, you could find that person right away, but it doesn't always happen like that, right? And now there are some people that I will admit are just addicted to the education component of this business. And let me tell you what, all the people that mainly just sell coaching out there, love you guys, that's for sure, because they know that it's a forever refilling pond of fish that they can, market to and get sales out of. But, I think really you have to, number one, decide on like what it is that your true core business is, right? And then once that's the case, try and find the absolute best person to help train you with that. And oftentimes that's not the biggest trainer out there, the biggest coaching program, because at a certain point when those get to scale, you just can't deliver a whole lot in terms of overall quality. You just can't do it, because all you're really trying to do is just grab as much money as you can at a certain point, right? So I would say, if you're getting education from somebody that truly has a real estate business of some sort still that they operate in on a daily basis, or, it runs on a daily basis, that would be a good place to definitely start. But I don't know, it's different for everybody. Some people are, there was that whole like Subto movement, right? Which basically made Pace, rich. And Subto is like this much of real estate, really, right? Mm-hmm. But he framed it like it's this entire thing that you can do to get rich for the rest of your life. And it's like, no, it works for like 3% of leads, maybe, that could be a deal. Like it's not, and maybe it's slightly more, slightly less, but it's not much at all, right? Like over the course of my career, I've done very few of them. Could I have done more? Sure, but they didn't really make sense. Just because you can do it Subto doesn't mean you should do it, right? And that's just the reality of it. So it just depends, man. That's my answer. I don't know. I'm curious what you think. You've had a lot of people that, you've learned from as well, whether it be, paid or just kind of friends, right? So I'm curious on your take on it.
It's funny on that topic. When you go on those Facebook groups, people just like Subto airplane, Subto lawnmower, Subto, they just love throwing things in there. They'll just sell or finance anything and everything. Yeah. I mean, what I told the guy on the call yesterday was, you only ever have the right to solve the current constraint you're facing. Because what I told him, I call mental masturbation. So he's doing a little bit of like mental masturbation in terms of like information for him is what he attributes progress to. Mm-hmm. And I think when we're all early in our career, we have a little bit of that, the podcast in the car, going to the meetups and the masterminds and the events. You feel like that information is progressing you forward, but most of the time it's not. It's just mentally you're gathering, pieces of the puzzle you don't need yet. And so what I told them, like, you probably already have enough information to do your next 5 deals. And then you'll run into the next roadblock. And, we were talking before the show, what we do for a lot of our clients, and they come on for lead generation, is we give them like our sales blueprint, because being able to sell is so important in this business. And that's if you're not already doing as many deals as you want to do, you have a leads and sales constraint. And so what I told them is focus truly on what your current bottleneck is and go to solve that. And for me, yeah, I've been in a few programs. I've gone to a lot of events, or especially earlier on, but now my focus is always, okay, what's our biggest thing that's in our way? And then I'll go pay to solve that, whether it be a fractional person to come in and work with the business, whether it be a consultant of some kind. But that's served me well, rather than just, oh my goodness, I want to learn about development and Subto and novations and wholesale, all of it at one time. That doesn't benefit you if your goal is to make money and do deals. Now, I will say that there's nothing wrong with it. Like, I think a lot of people genuinely enjoy just like getting more and more educated about business. So if you have the cash to do it, there's nothing wrong with it. But more times than not, it's just delaying execution that you already can take action on from the 4, 5, 6 programs someone's bought. So yeah, that's my take. Anything else on that before we move into the next question?
I mean, you could just look back at the trainings you have had, right? And just, look at your own pattern of like, did I implement, right? Anything or sustained implementation of anything that I learned? And if not, but you're moving on to the next one, like, why? Was that niche just not for you? Did you not like it? Or do you prefer mental masturbation over actually doing the work, right? So you kind of have to ask yourself those questions, but I think it's different for everybody. I think you summed it up perfectly, though. It's what is your constraint right now, right? If your constraint is, I don't know how to generate off-market leads, then maybe it's purely training for how to market for off-market leads. If I don't know how to talk to sellers once they do call me or whatever, or I call them, how do I do that, right? That's very different than like, who should I use for a servicing company when I do Subto so that they don't call the note due? And, it's like all that bullshit. It's like none of that shit fucking matters. It just doesn't matter until you get to that point. But to learn that before you learn the other things, you just have to kind of prioritize.
Yeah, I was told once that, and we've talked about it on the show before, that anyone listening to this, you can create $1 million of take-home income for yourself, whether you're flipping, wholesaling, developing, whatever you're doing. Like, the issue is not usually the exit strategy or the business type you're running. They can all get there. It's just, it becomes about personal preference, right? It's kind of like, I heard it equated to, getting married. There's no such thing as a person that has 0 issues or problems. Like, eventually you kind of just have to choose the person that you can work through those with and sit there and go, yeah, there could be theoretically, there is always potentially a better path to take. But eventually I feel like in life and in business, you have to just decide and deal with the bumps that come with that. And I think that's a lot of people's issue, is more they don't want to commit to any given business model because they're out there seeing at all the events and all the masterminds, other people talk about their sexy business model. And it's a little bit of that too. But I think the second question, I don't know if it's the second question on the call, but the second one that stuck out to me after the call wrapped up was someone who was asking, he's been a career wholesaler. So he's done let's say 40 deals. And he's really trying to kind of navigate his way into doing more flips, doing more development deals. And his question was, it was kind of more like, it was, Cole, do you think different people's personalities are more aligned with doing wholesaling or flipping or development? Because he struggled with changing over to doing flipping. And his question was like, how do you know like what you're meant for, almost like what version of the business? And I've been thinking about that because I do think there's some people personally that probably will have a better time working with contractors and babysitting contractors than others. There's probably people who will be better at growing a at scale sales team if they want to run a volume wholesale business than others. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, for people that are trying to decide what's next for them, is it a personality thing, or is it just you have to just choose and stick with it? Because he was 6-8 months in and had one flip going. It was over budget. It was taking way longer than he expected. He's like, is this something that isn't for me?
Yeah, it's a loaded question, but I think I got a pretty good answer for him. Number one, I don't know that it's necessarily personality related. Now, of course, there are some on each extreme that maybe shouldn't do, anything other than what they're doing, right? And really that just becomes like a stress threshold type, like, can you handle additional stress, right? Because if you're wholesaling, your stress is payroll marketing dollars, right? If you're wholesaling and you're flipping, it's payroll marketing dollars, acquisition money, renovation money, debt service money, and everything in between that's needed from when you buy it to when you sell it, right? So you're just layering on basically a lot more, financial stress and decision-making stress and things like that. Now, after a while, that just becomes the norm, like we've talked about on previous shows. So, I don't want to say that like if it doesn't feel right for your personality right away, it's not supposed to. Like that's supposed to be harder and different and not something you've done before. But the path that I've always told people to take when they're ready to do it, and if you take this path, you can always turn around and say at some point, like, okay, I did it and I don't enjoy it. I enjoy this part of the business, and that's fine. But I would say the path that people are most successful taking if they're going to grow from wholesaling to flipping is it all comes down to picking the right properties to flip first. When you go and you decide to take down a property that needs a massive renovation or, some sort of large scale gut rehab, reconfiguring, adding bathrooms, something like that on your first few flips, you're setting yourself up for massive failure because you're going to have huge budget overruns. You're going to hire a dumbass contractor who tells you something that you think is correct and he might think is correct, but it turns out not being. You're going to have, permitting nightmares and issues because you probably never dealt with the city and the city inspectors and things like that. You might even get red tagged and they shut you down for a while. And then your carrying costs get out of control. And then you got to find new contractors. So you got all these things that could go wrong, right? And then people are like, oh God, I hate this. I don't want to do this. Well, the reality is that you made that choice to flip that property, which had a much higher likelihood of things like that happening than other ones. And so I've always told people, pick the simplest houses that you can flip first, right? And the simplest houses are ranch style houses, right? 1 level, 3 bedroom, 1 bath, 3 bedroom, 1.5 bath, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 1,100 square feet, 1,200 square feet, 1,350 square feet. And you walk in, you got living room, you got a kitchen kind of on one end and a dining room, hallway, and you got the bedrooms and the bathrooms. And then you got a backyard with a slider that goes out to it usually, right? There's only so much, and maybe there's a fireplace in there. There's only so much that really can be wrong with those. Really you're doing a lot of services inside. You might do doors and trim. Maybe you just paint what's there, put in some new flooring, maybe some new carpet. Maybe the cabinets are shit in the kitchen, but you can paint them, put new hardware on them. You put some new appliances in, some new flooring. Maybe it needs a roof. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the windows are okay. You can clean them up. You can put some shutters on something, give it a little more dimension, whatever it is, do some landscaping. Voila, put it back on the market and sell it. And it's a great starter home, but you don't need an amazing contractor. You don't have incredibly long hold times because you can get through most all of that stuff without permitting, or permits aren't required, or what few permits you need, maybe for plumbing and HVAC and some electrical. Maybe you get them, maybe you don't, but they don't take that long to get their single trade permits, right? So if you do a project or 2 or 3 or 4 like that to start with, then you're building a bridge that's not too far from one side to the other, right? In terms of wholesaling to rehabbing. And that's what I did. And we probably did 50 of those before we took on, bigger scale renovations where we did start doing complete guts and reconfiguring floor plans and adding shed dormers upstairs and adding square footage or finishing out basements or all this kind of stuff, right? That is Pandora's box of problems. But if you don't know enough about construction, then you're completely relying on what other people tell you. And most of the time they're wrong, right? So it just sets you up for failure. So that would be my kind of stair step approach to getting into flipping from wholesaling. And if you do that, you're just going to limit the amount of shit that can go wrong. And if you limit the amount of shit that could go wrong, you're going to increase your success rate in being able to kind of go back and forth from lead generating, deal generating to actually taking it down, flipping it, and making the bigger spread on the retail market.
Yeah, I've never heard you package that up that way, that concisely. That was very well put. I think what I think about is that, there's the guys that, I don't know if you know what Grant Cardone is. Every year he does like the 10X growth con. Everything's like 10X. How could you not? He's 10X your business place, right? Tomorrow, right? Yeah. So, and I think it does people a disservice because the reality is one of the things I've had to learn the hard way is patience. Like as much as you want things to happen quickly, like you can, but realistically you're going to have massive downside if you try to jump from I've done 20 wholesale deals to I'm going to go buy a $2 million home on a hard money loan that's 3 stories and put together this flip and get it done on time. and with the complexity of the project, the financing, the contractors, and you're going to have a lot, you could do well, but you're going to have a lot of downside risk. And so I think one of the things that I did earlier on, not even really knowing it, when I did 40, 50, my first, call it 50 deals, I was very intrigued with this like sexy item, which was doing a flip. And I still to this day don't know much about flipping a home. Like I don't know what things cost. I don't really, but I said, I want to try this. And so what I did is I said, well, I don't know anything about this. And so I went to a buddy of mine, and the 4 or 5 flips that I've been a part of have been with a person like this. And I had a wholesale deal that everyone wanted, a very juicy wholesale deal. And instead of wholesaling it, I went to a guy like Tarl. Tarl's the first guy I did this with. And I said, hey, Tarl, I'm going to sell you this flip. I want to be part of the deal. And instead of making 30 on a wholesale deal, I ended up making 27 on the back end of the flip. But then we would drive to the project together in the car. I got to know him. I kind of got used to what his process was. He gave me access to his project management system, how it all worked together. And I kind of saw the whole thing happen. And it made money. It was on time. It was on budget with the right contractors. And it was a pretty simple split level deal in Lacey, Washington. Wasn't a lot to it. Pretty clean house. But to me, I was able to peek in the door and go, okay, this isn't for me. But I was able to do that without creating a massive amount of downside risk for myself. And you guys that are out there, if you have the ability to source deals, you're doing the marketing and leads piece, and you have what everyone wants, the deal, you have leverage to go to one of your buyers and put together something like that, where you can do a JV with them and you can learn their processes and you can meet their contractors. When you do it that way, it's a form of coaching and mentorship, but where they have skin in the game and they're kind of paid to teach you and they're paid to bring you in on how they do things. And I think that's an awesome way for people to also bridge that gap. And that was a lot of what I talked about on that call. Is there's ways to bridge that gap, like Tucker talked about too, where you just limit. It's all about limiting, I think, downside risk to your business, because you're adding so many operational challenges for yourself when you cross that bridge, whether it's the wholesaling, flipping development, whatever you're doing. And I saw so many people, I know you did too, Tucker, during COVID, said, man, I'm a house flipper and I'm making good money house flipping, but I want to raise a fund and I want to go buy 100-unit apartment complexes. And that leads to really bad places. At least I don't know any situation where that led to a good place. The 3 or 4 guys I know that took that route didn't, and they ended up owing a lot of people a lot of money. And it didn't do anything for their brand and career that was positive. The people that I know that slowly bridged gaps over a 20, 30-year career, they figure it out. And I think for all of you guys listening, I think that question really was, how patient should I be? And this guy's in his late 20s. And I think I realized for myself as I approach my late 20s, you have to be just a lot more patient than you want to be. And you think you need to be as skill set develops, as all of it comes along. So yeah, anything on that one before we move on?
I think you gave great advice too. And there's no reason why you can't marry those two, versions, right? Like you can JV with somebody to learn their process, but you could still, on the first one you do solo, take the advice that I just said, right? Because the last thing you want to do is get into a bigger project that's over your head. So, you can take baby steps, or you can go, maybe take a slightly bigger step, but you don't want that bridge to be too wide. And you definitely, and I hear people that are wholesalers that are like, oh, I tied up this development deal. And I'm like, do you know anything about the entitlement process? No, but I'm going to figure it out. It's like, that's a bridge too far 99% of the time. Like so yeah, you're right. Patience is key. You can take over the whole world eventually, but like, you just have to do it piece by piece, brick by brick, step by step. And, it's just patience, man. It's just patience and learning. That's really what it is. So I think those were both good pieces of advice for people to take if they're looking to do that.
I think part of what makes this show fun is, I don't know how many people of you guys out there know the story of how our company started. I was doing leads for my company, and then pretty much Elliot made an introduction of me to Tucker. I went on his podcast, and then we were texting, or I think calling, and he posed the idea of like, hey, I think this could be an actual business. But I think he had the foresight to see that obviously I was 2021 and there's just so many things you have to go through. So I feel like a lot of the advice that I give on the show, that he gives on the show, is stuff that I've heard from Tucker a lot of my career. I remember one time specifically, I was going through a partnership issue, which leads into the next question. I was going through a partnership issue, and I called him on it, and he was like, I think the issue is essentially both of you guys just think you're going to get rich a lot faster than it actually takes. And I think it was incredibly true. And another thing he told me was not to turn on the faucet very fast because it's hard to turn off. And I took that to heart too, of as your income and business increases, adding too much lifestyle expense as that happens puts you in a bad spot. So That leads to the next question. The third question, we'll kind of wrap on this one because it'll be a topic we can dive into for 10 minutes or so. It's a fun one. It was about partnerships, and it was about, as you're growing your real estate company, how do you know if it's a smart decision to bring on a partner, when to do it, when to not do it? How to identify a potential good partner. I've had partnerships. I know you have, we have one. We've had one for a long time. The only partnership that's really lasted for me is our current partnership. The ones in the real estate company didn't go so well. So that's a question I'll pose to you, because I'm sure you've seen hundreds of people come through your program and been in your circle of the day that had partnerships of some kind, and I have my opinions on it as well. But wherever you want to start with that topic, I think that'll be incredibly valuable for listeners.
I think number one, I want to separate like a real estate business and having partners and a business and having partners, that's right? That's I think they're completely different animals. And the reason I say that is because, in a business, you have to kind of divide and conquer, right? And you can have similar and differing skill sets, but you still have to, when you're running a business with lots of people involved, like sometimes it's good to have just varying personality types at the top, right? To help deal with all the kind of downline of employees and managers and salespeople and everything else, while also giving kind of just moral and general support that it takes to run a business that supports a lot of people. On the real estate side, I think people run and get into partnerships together because they feel like they need that moral and general support, right? And that's enough to sustain a real estate partnership. And at the end of the day, it's not, because eventually you get comfortable with flipping a ranch style home, right? That needs a little minor updates and selling. And then you're splitting at the end of the day, the profits between you and somebody else. And it's just very difficult to have something like that sustain, where one person's, doesn't think I could do this on my own and keep the whole enchilada, right? And so I've seen, I don't even know how many real estate partnerships over the years, people that have come through the trainings and the masterminds that I've had. And I would say 99.99% of them didn't last. Sometimes partnerships are helpful, like we discussed in the previous question. Like if you partner with somebody who maybe they build houses and you generate leads, right? And so you got your partnership is, look, I'll work on generating the leads. You manage the contractors in the building and the disposition, and that partnership, it will work for longer than other ones, but you guys are bringing differing skill sets to the relationship or the partnership, right? Which then helps the business hopefully grow and function better. It's when people bring on a partner where your skill sets are basically the same. You guys know the same amount of stuff. You're trying to figure things out on your own, kind of moving forward. And nobody has anything really different that they can provide the business other than just like moral support for each other. And those ones always implode because eventually you just don't need the moral support, or one person doesn't. And then, and so it kind of creates friction, and then friction creates cracks, and then it breaks up. So if you're going to do a real estate partnership, I always say do it deal by deal, right? To start with, because and if it goes on for 5 or 10 deals, great. Call that a successful partnership in real estate, right? But to start a business together and kind of run one, it's tough. I mean, there are people that have done it, but it's definitely a challenge, and I haven't seen many sustain the test of time. That's for sure.
Yeah, I only know one that's been a 20, 30-year partnership. That's Jimmy and Will. And I think the thing that they do is they essentially run different companies under the same umbrella. Mm-hmm. And so they don't touch each other's stuff. Like Jimmy's running the brokerage, he's running the wholesaling and flipping business, he's running and then when the Will's running their funding company as well as their development stuff. And I think that to me is like they're kind of part of the same army.
It's almost a bigger business though, right? Yeah, like at that point, you're almost running like a big business. And that's honestly the only way for it to sustain. Like the business has to grow to the point, and both people have to be like, we're going to take over the world type people, right? And to do that, to have that combination, it's very rare, but, and then to sustain is even rarer, but it has to be a big enough business. Like just building houses or renovating houses or wholesaling, it's not a big enough business to have partnerships that sustain the test of time, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've seen so many partnerships come and go. I've had my own too in real estate that have come and gone. I think you separated it well, because I think people in general business, like serial entrepreneurs who are starting business after business, they kind of know the whole process of like, they don't feel as lonely anymore. They kind of understand the general what business is. And they realize if they're going to engage in a partnership, it needs to be very tactical. The founders in Silicon Valley, when they create a startup, they go and recruit co-founders based on like their history and career. And they'll go find like someone very IT focused. They'll go find someone very product focused. They'll go find someone very like enterprise growth focused that have those backgrounds. And they'll come together and say, hey, you're elite at this. I'm elite at this. You're elite at that. It makes, we're going to get 3 is going to equal 9 instead of 3 is going to equal 6 if we all come together here. And I think you have to have that where if you're going to enter a partnership, especially in real estate, 1 + 1 has to equal 3. It has to triple the business or quadruple the business, to Tucker's point, to get big enough to sustain that. And I've seen people try to create partnerships of 3 people. And like, there's just not enough money to go around, especially as you grow. But in real estate specifically, the biggest issue I see is loneliness. I feel like most people, when they get into real estate, they aren't serial entrepreneurs. They're leaving their W-2, they're leaving their sales job. They've been real estate brokers or agents or mortgage brokers, and they've kind of been around real estate, and their first business is a real estate business. I think that's a big part of the issues in our space. It's not usually serial entrepreneurs starting a real estate company. It's usually a first-time entrepreneur a lot of the time, starting and hustling their way to their first couple of deals. And they say, hey, I'm kind of lonely. This is harder than I thought. Let me go find someone who's also lonely and who's battling the same thing. And in very rare cases that works, because a lot of times you're not making a decision off of skill set or tactics. You're making a decision off, hey, you're lonely and struggling. I'm lonely and struggling. Let's be lonely and struggling together. And then as you grow, like for me, what happened is as I grew, I got more and more confident as an entrepreneur. So did my partner. And all of a sudden, I think you both kind of go, I could run this business solo. You could run this business solo. We'd both make more money. And then there's usually an ugly separation, especially if you have rental properties together and if you have active projects together, and you have debt together, it can get really gnarly. Thankfully, I didn't have a lot of that, but I see that happen time and time again. So I think it has to be tactical. And it's not to say it can't work, but I've just seen so many partnerships come and go and quicker than you think because of those things. And I think a real estate business is one that makes more sense to run solo. And you can pay salespeople very well. You can pay a team very well. But I think especially as you get more experience, it makes more sense to run solo because then you have to do less deals and there's more profit and you're not forced to build this big machine. Because a lot of people don't want that. And they end up building this big machine just because there's 3 owners that have to get fed.
Yeah. And I mean, to be totally, honest, I've never had an actual partner in my real estate business. Now I have partnered on deals. There was a guy that, good dude that he used to like to flip shitty hood houses. Yep. And I didn't. But he liked to do everything as cheap as humanly possible. So when we generate these shitty hood house leads, it'd be like, okay, here's one. I could wholesale it to you, or we could partner on the deal and you can handle it and go there and deal with it and hire the cheapest guys you could find off Craigslist to do this, that, and whatever else. And it worked fine. We probably did, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these together over time, but we're still friends to this day. Right. And so, I had partnerships like that were deal related, but never actual partner in the real estate business.
Yeah, I think strategic partnerships make sense. And I think the partnerships that do work, at least what I realize, is I think there almost has to be some kind of, what's the word? Almost like void between one of the partners. And I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. Like the reason I think Tucker and I's partnership works is because there is a decade and a half gap in experience and knowledge. And it creates this constant like mutual value add where I'm in a phase of my career where I'm constantly learning day by day of becoming a better entrepreneur, and to have someone like that to go, and we're in a business where it can get big enough where you can have partnerships too, right? But I think the reality is, as I've analyzed why this one's worked so well, I think there's a respect and a void of knowledge that's there where I think a lot of what happens if you go partner with a buddy, eventually you kind of look at each other and go like, there's no real like benefit. Like I'm not learning from you. There's nothing here. And I think when you have my partnerships that have worked in my career are with people that have a lot more experience because it just creates. I think it's like a relationship. When you look at when I look at my marriage, there's things I clearly suck at that my wife is great at, and I think in our partnership that exists as well. Maybe it's not that extreme, but I think it's like an example is when we go through issues, normally Tucker will come in at an offsite or a meeting once in a while. He doesn't day to day. He's not like, hey, fix this, fix that. It's once in a while. It's, hey, the plane may crash into the mountain here. It's probably something to look at. And I think for you guys that are looking for partners, if it's not going to be strategic, it's not going to be for a few deals, but it's going to be for building a business. I think looking at someone that's stable in their personal life, that's kind of stable all around, and then you add in a mutual respect, I think good things tend to happen.
Yeah, that's a whole nother can of worms, is when you have a partnership where people have messy personal lives. Yeah. You can guarantee that that's going to messy up the business too. So, and you can't pick, you don't know that ahead of time, but if people are prone to personal life issues, they're usually a bad marriage partner and a bad business partner. That's just the way it is. The one of the truths of life.
Yep. Cool, guys. Well, we'll wrap there today. Appreciate all of you guys hanging out for 30 minutes with us today. I think that there are valuable topics we went through. I think it was a fun show. I enjoyed this a lot more than a lot of the shows we filmed. So I think we'll do more of these style episodes in the future. As always, a review, a like, a share means the world. We don't put paid promotion behind this podcast. It grows through you guys. So our email list, our community, the people out there that spread the word. So leave a review. You can message us anywhere, give us feedback, advice, things that you'd want to see on the show. And until next time, you're only one deal away.